friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another installment in my Watching AI Videos So You Don't Have To series. The purpose of this is I see some great ideas out there with some really good lists of things. However, most of what you're seeing that is put out this way now is all AI generated. And I find it highly agitating. So I figure since now the AI is taking over and kind of putting the rest of us out of a job in a lot of ways, I decided why not buck the system a little bit and take those ideas, their lists, and break them down from the point of view of a real live human being. Let's get started on this list. Point number one is about clothing. What did they do during the Depression to help cut the cost of clothing? Because everything then, of course, was about cutting costs because it was a depression. Well, they would stretch out their clothing in so many ways. And one of those obviously would be simply being able to repair rips and tears, busted out seams, torn off buttons, and the like. And, having at least some just very moderate hand stitching skills could really take an article of clothing and make it last for much, much longer. But then if the clothing got maybe to a point where it was really kind of beyond just repairing, they would still take the fabric from that clothing or the buttons or the zippers, save as much as they can to either use that for repairing or patching other pieces of clothing, or to make a whole new article of clothes. They would even do this with wool sweaters. They would actually very meticulously take apart the yarn in knitted wool sweaters and then take that yarn and knit new sweaters or socks or whatever. In a lot of cases, because there would be parts that would be unusable, so there wouldn't be as much material there, it would be something they might, it might be an adult size sweater or shirt or pants that then they could make into something that would fit someone smaller, a teenager or younger child. And then you also, of course, had the sock darning, as was shown in my thumbnail. That was actually me, where I did a video on how to darn socks that I will link to down below, using the sock darner that Patrick made for me. And so I actually find that socks that I have darned are my very favorite socks, because I can make that sole nice and cushy and soft and make it last so much longer, because usually the rest of the sock is in great shape. It's just the heel that wears out. I haven't actually needed to darn my own socks in a long time since switching to Grip 6 and Darn Tough socks. Okay, point number two is saving seeds and growing a garden. So if you learn how to grow a garden, that should be where you start. Start learning what you can grow, start working with it, and obviously the more food, even if it's just a few herbs in a windowsill, the more you can grow for yourself, the more money you will be able to save, because you can really start gardening for really cheap. And even if it, like I say, is something like growing in pots and doing it in your windowsill with a few herbs, things like basil, oregano, thyme, sage, etc., these can go a long way for seasoning your food, adding more flavor, as well as being used medicinally. All of your culinary herbs have some kind of medicinal value, which is another reason why I love them so much, and growing as many of them as I can. And then, of course, from that, then you would learn how to save those seeds. And in most cases, it's pretty simple, but every plant's going to have its own, way to be able to get the seeds off the plant, and you might take a few different steps. But saving those seeds, especially from your annuals, but even from your perennials, because you never know when you're going to lose a perennial. Something can happen, and you can have a perennial plant you think that's been there for years that suddenly up and dies. Maybe a mole totally digs it up and kills the plant. You never know what's going to happen. So I still recommend, even from your perennials, making sure you save seeds. That's what I do, just in case I need to get more started. And then you don't have to keep buying seeds every year. Now you've got your own seeds, and you can even use those seeds or excess herbs or other vegetables and fruits you get from your garden for barter, which is the very next point. When you're in need of something that you either can't grow or something that needs to be done that you can't do yourself because you don't have the skill set or the knowledge, you can barter with your own skill set or items for those things that somebody else does. This is what they did during the Depression. It was one of the many things they did to cut costs, and everybody worked together to be able to survive. Again, having a good community of people that you can work with is going to be important. Not just going to be, but is important now. I think it's all these things are habits we should start building now. Even if nothing on a grand scale ever happens, you can still learn now to how just to start saving money, especially when the coupon clipping just doesn't do you any good anymore because a lot of the products have been tainted or things you just don't use or full of toxins. You can start practicing these other methods to make up the difference in what you can't use in coupons. Okay, turning leftovers into a whole new meal. So, you can have leftovers and you can eat it that same way another night or two, but it's learning how to take some of the leftovers. Like I have a whole series on making the most of leftovers, all pretty much based off meat products. So if you have a roast of some kind, beef, elk, venison, you have a chicken, you have a turkey, you have maybe a big fillet of fish, you can't eat the whole thing in one night, or you just want to stretch it. Being able to take the meat from those, whatever is left over, and stretch it into 1, 2, 3 other types of meals. It is amazing what you can do with a single roast. Beef roast can be quite expensive, but it really isn't that bad when you know how to stretch it. And take that beef roast and make 4 different types of meals out of it, and each one of those meals can stretch for 2 or 3 days on its own. So I will be linking to my Making the Most of Leftovers series in the description box down below so you can get some ideas from there, maybe just some fresh new ideas to add to your list of things that you already do. Homemade furniture from scrap materials, whether it be old barns or fence boards. Fruit crates were really common to be used to make basically dressers, shelving, anything where you can sort stuff out and keep things neat and clean. These days we tend to have a lot of pallets that you can get, and you can take that and make all kinds of furniture out of that. You can also, like Patrick has taken pallets and made, what did he do with pallets? Oh, he's made me some boxes for my canning jars out of pallets. He has built this countertop and our bathroom cabinet, our second bathroom, the cabinet in there, out of the old decking from his equipment trailer that needed to be replaced. So he was able to take a lot of the wood from that and put it into a new use. And then in that same bathroom, there's a shelf. He's got a video on this, by the way, that he took, somebody gave him some old, really rustic looking, broken down fence boards, and he made me an absolutely adorable shelf that I love, very rustic. There's another shelf he made in the hallway out of some more scrap wood. So this was common during the Great Depression. People couldn't afford to run out and buy new furniture when something got broke down. They could make it out of scraps that cost them nothing. Number 6, using every part of the animal. So that kind of comes back to the making the most of leftovers. Let's say you have a chicken. You're going to roast that chicken. You're going to take the meat and eat on that, make meals out of that meat. You're going to take the bones, make them into a bone broth, and then even after that, you can take the bones. Usually they're pretty soft and you can just crush them, and you can dehydrate them. This is something I have to admit I have not tried yet. You can then dry them and then powder them, and that can be used as a meal to add to your gardens. Because have you ever heard of bone meal? Bone meal is an excellent fertilizer for your garden. And so you're using every part from the skin clear down to the bones. And you can do this with all kinds of different meats. And then they had the ability of making some really cheap meals out of very simple things. This is why you constantly hear preppers talking about storing up rice and beans. Well, rice and beans technically is pretty cheap. Obviously, these days we're trying to look for either those things that we can grow ourselves or buy that's organic, non-GMO, hasn't been sprayed with a bunch of garbage. But rice, beans, cornmeal, potatoes, and flour, you can actually make a pretty satisfying meal that's going to fill the gut. But obviously, having some of these garden goods that you can add to these meals will make them a lot more interesting. And, we're talking the herbs, but we're also talking about a lot of those vegetables or any leftover bits of meat and broth that you can mix with these to create a meal all your own. Number 8, I thought it was kind of interesting. This one came up because homemade ice cream was something they did. I think in a lot of cases, if people had dairy animals, yes, and they would take the cream off the milk from their dairy animals, they could turn that into ice cream, sometimes even make snow cream out of it, which my mother used to do when I was growing up. After we got a lot of really good snow and we knew the last snowfall was nice and clean, she would get a bunch of that, have some heavy whipping cream, a couple of eggs and some banana, mix that up, and we would have snow cream. It was wonderful. Oh yeah, and don't forget the vanilla extract. But I thought it was funny because I've been recently getting back into making our own ice cream out of milk, heavy cream, all organic milk and heavy cream, organic sugar, and my own homemade vanilla extract. And it's just been really wonderful to be able to do that and know exactly what's going in it. Now, this one I've heard of before, but have never done. And that is, a lot of these people, could get pretty cold in the winter and they might not have had great insulation, but they always had a lot of newspapers. And they would take newspapers and ball them up and make some insulation to stuff into the walls to help keep their houses warmer in the winter time. So using fruit and vegetable scraps, for making broths, fruit scraps for making special treats, they would dry them out, maybe sprinkle a little sugar on them so that'd be like peels and stuff, let them dry, and then you can have, that makes a nice little snack right there. And don't forget compost, as well as making your own homemade vinegar. That wasn't actually in the list, but that's what I do with fruit scraps is I make vinegar out of it and then I compost it. And a lot of your scraps, like people see like carrot tops or beet greens and whatnot as scraps, you can dehydrate those and make a greens blend out of it that can get added to anything to add more nutrients to your diet. Now, here was an interesting one. If they got leaky roofs, most people could not afford to get a whole new roof or even hire someone to fix their roof for them. So they would have to patch their own roofs with whatever they had. They would use things like tin cans, paper, newspapers, canvas, and then they would coat these things in stuff like pine pitch or used motor oil to make them more waterproof. That's not something that's necessarily going to last forever, but it can definitely get you through a season until you can do a better patch job, making shingles from salvaged wood or using moss. Homemade cleaning products. Now I have a couple videos on this. I'll link to my most recent one on the natural cleaning products I make and use, but for them, it's pretty much the same stuff. It would be vinegar, baking soda, ammonia, which I don't know when the last time was I used ammonia, and then wood ash plus fat to make soap that they could use in their laundry to wash their bodies with, as long as you get that ratio of the wood ash, which they'd make the lye out of the wood ash, and then that soap can be used for cleaning all kinds of things. So I have videos, a whole playlist on soap making that I'll link to down below. But you can use animal fats, you can use coconut oil. There's all kinds of different fats you can use to make soaps. But in this case, it's typically going to be the fats that they got from the animals they butchered. This next one is about toys. dolls would be made from corn cobs or the husk of the corn. You would see that a lot. And then making little dresses for them out of fabric scraps. And oh, I forgot to say on point one where I was talking about clothing, I totally forgot. I don't even know if I wrote it down, but they often used flour sacks, because back then flour sacks and other types of sacks would be made out of a fabric. And when the companies realized that the ladies were taking those fabrics to make new dresses for their daughters and themselves, they actually started putting nice prints on them, flower prints and so on. So with that said, they'd have all these fabric scraps they could use to make the dresses. Tin cans were used in all kinds of ways. I'm sure some of you grew up playing kick the can. And then they were also used to make the telephone. With a piece of string and 2 tin cans, you got a little telephone, and you could connect them. Sometimes they would even connect them to between 2 houses, and people could talk to each other with those. There were also dolls made from old clothespins and slingshots made from a forked branch. So go figure. And that slingshot was not only a toy, it could be used for hunting small game. And also jump ropes from old stockings. Now here's another one that definitely has to do with the community aspect, and that would be sharing items. So if somebody had a sewing machine, this would be something where you'd set up times where other people in the community could come use that sewing machine in a slotted time frame. Same thing would go for more heavy equipment for, tilling up the land, or hand tools, or even larger tools that people had that somebody else couldn't afford, and people would share these things with each other. And so again, this is why having a good solid community of trustworthy people is important. Oh yes, and even wedding dresses. Wedding dresses could get passed from one person to another and tailored as needed. Now, leftover animal fats would, besides making soap out of that would also be used in baking, in frying, and in pie crusts. I know for one, I really love leftover beef fat from a roast, or even that beef bacon. I like to take that and fry potatoes in that. So good. It adds so much more flavor. You can do the same thing for stir frying vegetables and whatnot. Throw a little bit of that animal fat in there. You're getting that good healthy fat as well as that wonderful flavor that comes from that. And that's not just beef. That's from chicken, from turkey, from whatever. And each one has their own special name for it as well. Then there's the homemade candles made from, candles that had burned down, and then that remaining wax would get melted down and combined together with the rest of the old candles and make a whole new candle out of that. They also used wax from cheese, the wax layer from cheese that they would get, melt that down, turn that into candles, as well as beef fat and beeswax. And then come the jars, the recycling of bottles and jars in so many ways. So using maybe the canning jars they already had, but other types of jars and bottles for storing things, for storing even sewing notions like buttons and whatnot. Of course, for canning in, but also for storing seeds and nails, for using as vases. They would often take the canning jar and use it for a hot lunch. So if they're going to send soup or something, they'd put that in the canning jar, wrap it in newspapers for insulation, so when their husbands got to work at lunchtime, it would still at least be warm. Newspaper is a great insulator, by the way. They'd use them as cookie and biscuit cutters, and even use them as mini greenhouses for starting new plants for their garden. Number 18 is rainwater harvesting. This is something we've been doing for many years for several reasons. I have a video on this I'll link to down below. But yes, this was common. Rainwater harvesting, even if you're not set up for cleaning that water, like you don't have any way to purify it, you don't have any good filters or an RO system or whatever, you can still take that rainwater and use it for watering your garden, and it costs you nothing. And the last one is cutting their heating expenses, or firewood if they're depending on wood heat, they'd keep the house a little cooler, and they would just bundle up, and that way they're saving all the way around. Whether it be electric, gas, or wood heat, they could still really save and stretch that by simply layering up. And I think a lot of people just don't even know how to layer anymore. But, starting with like a cotton undershirt, putting another shirt over that, you've got your sweater, you've got your jackets, long underwear, of course, cotton being really important because it's going to breathe better than, nowadays you have all this polyester stuff. Don't layer with polyester unless it's the very most outer layer, but the stuff that's closest to your skin, it needs to be a breathable fabric so that you're not building up sweat that is then going to freeze. So layering is a good important thing to know how to do in order to stay warm. So let me know your thoughts on this, and any other ideas you would like to throw in, please put them in comments down below. And also let me know, are you enjoying this series? What do you think about it? Should I continue to keep doing it? I mean, my first video at the time I'm shooting this hasn't even published yet, so I'm really taking a chance by making more before I even see how that one's going to perform. But what I do know is I'm having fun doing it. And again, it's a way for me to buck the system just a little bit, if nothing else, and be able to put things in more human terminology instead of having to put up with listening to and watching AI videos that are often inaccurate or poorly worded, or bad images were used, and you get tired of listening to those AI generated voices. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to check out the playlists and other videos I'll be linking to in the description box. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.